It's Naisha. Welcome back or welcome to my podcast where we talk real raw and unfiltered. And we get down to the nitty gritty and we talk about the shit y'all don't want to talk about because what the fuck? Hi. The queen is back and she's in the comfort of her own home. Welcome back or welcome to my podcast where we talk real raw and unfiltered and we get down to the nitty gritty and we talk about the shit that y'all don't want to talk about. The shit that we sweep under the rug that's not on the surface. Because it's nothing surface level with the queen. Okay, today we're gonna talk about boundaries and about discipline. We're gonna approach this differently though. I think that a lot of people get confused on what a boundary is. A lot of people look at boundaries as rules for other people or punishment for other people or a demand on, bitch, you need to do this. That's not a boundary. Boundaries are either for you or for another person, but it can be for both. That's just up to you to determine what that is or who it's for. A boundary is me deciding what I'm willing and not willing to tolerate, whether that's in myself or for another person. A boundary is mostly always in place for, or should always be in place for you and controlling yourself, not to necessarily control the next person. For an example, let's talk about when it comes to like relationships or friendships. If I'm constantly having to tell you what I don't like um that you're doing or something that you're saying or something that you're contributing to, if I'm having to constantly reinforce or tell you that I don't like a thing or that I don't fuck with a thing, if I'm constantly having to remind you, that's not a boundary, that is control. Control is tied to making someone behave differently, and you cannot control what another person does. You only can control what you do and how you react and what you tolerate. So therefore, if you're constantly having to reinforce or constantly having to remind someone, that is not you having a boundary with them, that is you trying to control their actions and what they're doing. Boundary is when you state what you're willing to tolerate. It only requires action from self. And a person can either align with that, they can agree to align with that, or they cannot align with that. But the thing about a boundary is you don't try to convince anybody to do whatever your boundary is or to align with whatever your boundary is. You just simply set that boundary on the table and a person can either fall in with that or they can get the fuck on. It's that simple. When you change your behavior, not them. So therefore, if I'm telling you what I'm willing to or what I require and what I tolerate and what I will not tolerate, and you're not falling in with that, and I'm still contributing or allowing something that I already said that I don't tolerate or vice versa, then that's a boundary without discipline with self. And I feel like that right there is where people get boundaries and discipline mixed up. People confuse enforcing boundaries as constantly having to repeat yourself, or they think being disciplined with someone is being strict with them and giving them rules that they need to oblige by, and that's not the case. Or they feel like boundaries with other people don't work because the other person isn't listening to what they're saying, and that is the problem. You trying to be in control of another person's actions, how another person moves, etc. Control is not a boundary. You cannot control what another human being does. And that should never be the goal when it comes to a boundary. Control is when you're trying to make someone show up or appear differently. So if I'm constantly having to enforce or remind you of anything, constantly having to over explain, that is not a boundary, that is control. A real boundary is when you state what you tolerate and you don't try to change or you don't try to make anyone agree with what your boundaries are. You simply put your boundary on the table and whoever fall in. Whoever the fuck don't get with the program, simply get the fuck left. Your job isn't to convince other people to oblige by your boundaries. It is for you to stand firm on your boundaries, to walk away if someone isn't respecting those boundaries. In a lot of cases, yes, boundaries can be both for self and for the other person, but most of the time, boundaries should always be for self. Where people get boundaries mixed in with discipline. Hence, I do this myself, so I'm calling myself out. Fuck y'all. I feel like I tend to mix boundaries up with discipline with other people instead of being disciplined with myself is when I always be getting overly fucking strict with people about the shit or a certain way that I want them to act or how I want them to show up and shit like that. But the epiphany that I had earlier about the way that I wanted to address this with basically saying like to have boundaries with other people or boundaries and discipline with other people, you have to have boundaries and discipline with self. But I don't believe that you should have discipline with other people because with other people that isn't your children and to a certain extent or a certain age, but that's a different story. You should only be being disciplined with self. Other people should discipline themselves. I always feel like I have to constantly tell you how I want you to act, what I don't want you to do, and shit like that. That is not me placing a boundary with you. That is me trying to be in control of you and what you're doing. When I cannot be in control of you and what you're doing, I can only be in control of me and what I'm doing and how I act and how I show up. A boundary is me telling you what I tolerate and what I will do if you don't oblige, or not even oblige, if you don't follow my boundaries or if you don't respect my boundaries, then bitch, I will walk away. Then this is where discipline comes in because I understood that I cannot be disciplined with another fucking adult, bitch. If anything, I have to be disciplined with myself about what the fuck I'm willing to tolerate and what the fuck I do. If I'm constantly overgiving and you're giving me shit that I don't fucking like, then bitch, where's the discipline with self? Exactly, there isn't any. So when we overgive or when we constantly contribute or add to dynamics that are taken away, we're not having no type self discipline. Discipline should not be for other people. It should be for you. So boundaries can be for me and other people, but discipline, that's very much for self. And that goes into a lot of people don't have boundaries with other people or themselves. So this is something that I believe a lot of people tend to get frustrated when people aren't doing what they say or listening, etc. But if you were disciplined with self, then you wouldn't even be tolerating certain shit. Ha! Fuck! Oh my god. Bitch, I just called myself out. Fuck. I was talking to someone and they basically said you can't hold someone to a standard that you don't hold yourself to. And while that is true, I feel like it can be contradicting. I feel like for a lot of people that is true. Don't don't let me take that away from you. But I feel like for most cases, or for my case, is you can't hold other people to a standard that they don't hold themselves at. Basically saying you can't expect more out of somebody than what they expect out of themselves. Oh my fucking god. And a lot of the times we expect too much out of people. Therefore, you can enforce a boundary 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 100 times, a lot of times, but it don't matter if you're constantly having to repeat yourself, and that does become draining. It's like you're constantly overextending yourself. You're constantly over giving or exhausting yourself. But if you had discipline with yourself, then you wouldn't even be tolerating certain shit, or you wouldn't even be dealing with certain shit, or nor would you constantly be reinforcing certain shit. Boundaries don't change people. Discipline changes what you keep tolerating. And if nothing changes, then that means everything shifts back to you, and your job isn't to try to change anything or anyone. It is to change what you do and what you're tolerating and how you're moving. If you knew better, you would do better.